There's a reason some people feel out of place long before they have language for it. As kids, they stare at ceilings longer than they play with toys. As teenagers, they feel like the world is performing a play everyone else rehearsed without them. And as adults, they keep waiting for something unnamed to finally begin. In this story, that feeling isn't treated as confusion or trauma. It's treated as timing. In a set of texts attributed to a teacher known here as Aaron of the Quiet Way, there's a private exchange that never made it into public doctrine. No crowds, no sermons, no moral lessons. Just a small circle, a locked room, and a statement so precise it scared the systems that came after it. Aaron didn't speak about belief. He spoke about placement. He said certain souls don't arrive randomly. They arrive on schedule, not schedules written on calendars, but schedules written into time itself. In this tradition, time isn't a straight line. It pulses. It contracts and opens like breath. And within that pulse, there are narrow windows where consciousness can enter matter without losing its memory completely. Most arrivals happen anywhere. But some are inserted deliberately. When the frequency is thin enough to hold something brighter, those who arrive through these windows grow up with a subtle fracture. Not brokenness, misalignment. The world feels slightly miscalibrated, like a radio station tuned almost, but not quite, to the right frequency. Success doesn't satisfy. Pleasure fades fast. Even suffering feels oddly impersonal, like it belongs to someone else. According to Aaron, that sensation is the residue of origin. A spark that remembers more than the environment allows. In the Quiet Way writings, this spark is called the source fragment. Not a metaphor. Not a symbol. A literal unit of originating awareness that predates the systems governing the visible world. It doesn't enter bodies casually. It enters under conditions. And one of those conditions is the moment of entry, what we now reduce to a birth month. This is where the institutions intervened. Because if timing itself carries meaning, then authority collapses. There's no gatekeeper between a person and their origin. No ritual needed to access what was already embedded. That idea didn't threaten belief. It threatened control. Centuries later, when the Unified Doctrine Council assembled to standardize acceptable teaching, the Quiet Way texts weren't debated. They were flagged. The council notes don't call them false. They call them destabilizing. Writings that allow individuals to locate divinity without mediation are always labeled dangerous. They create people who don't kneel easily. So the language was softened. Time became linear. Birth became biological. The source fragment became symbolic. And anyone who still felt the misalignment was told it was sin, ego, imagination, or illness. But the feeling persisted. Because you can't erase a frequency by renaming it, Aaron described the world itself as a containment field. Not evil, not malicious, just dense. Governed by lesser intelligences that maintain repetition, habit, and emotional drain. In these texts, they're called regulators. Not monsters. Patterns. They feed on unresolved emotion and mental noise. Fear, shame, comparison, endless wanting. The more distracted a person is, the easier they are to loop, but the regulators have limits. They can't access the source fragment directly. They can't read it. They can only sense its interference with the system. That's why people carrying it often experience disproportionate pressure. Not because they're weak, but because something in them doesn't sync cleanly with the environment. This pressure starts early. Being misunderstood. Being told you're too intense or not practical. Feeling watched without seeing a watcher. having moments of clarity that vanish the second you try to explain them. According to Aaron, this isn't random psychological noise. It's friction between incompatible layers of reality, and here's the detail that changes everything: the regulators cannot alter the entry code. The moment of arrival is sealed before the containment field fully formed. Whatever intelligence governs that placement operates upstream of the system. Earlier. Cleaner. Untouchable. The timing itself becomes a mark, quiet, internal, but permanent. That's why Aaron told his students to stop searching outward. No more accumulating knowledge. No more waiting for permission. Instead, he asked them to feel their own arrival. To notice when their body first felt foreign. When the world first felt thin. When belonging failed to land. He said those memories orbit the original timing. Follow them closely enough, and the seal begins to respond. This teaching wasn't meant to inspire. It was meant to orient. To explain why some people are never comfortable fully inhabiting roles, identities, or expectations. They're not here to decorate the system. They're here to remember something prior to it, and once that memory starts stirring, suppression gets louder. Doubt spikes. Distraction multiplies. The mind suddenly fills with reasons to dismiss what feels quietly certain. Aaron warned about this too. He said resistance is diagnostic. Systems don't defend against fantasies. They defend against recognition. So if you've ever felt like your life began slightly before your body did, if the world feels like a waiting room instead of a destination, if nothing ever fully convinces you this is all there is, then this story isn't introducing something new. It's naming something old, and the naming has consequences. Once the idea of timing is accepted, the next layer opens on its own. Aaron never separated identity from function. He didn't tell his students who they were so they could feel special. He told them so they could stop misusing themselves. According to the quiet way, the source fragment doesn't arrive uniformly. It carries different orientations depending on when it enters. Aaron referred to these orientations as seals, not marks of status, but operational modes. There are many minor seals scattered across time, but 3 windows carry what he called primary imprinting. These aren't common. They aren't balanced. And they don't blend in. Souls entering through these windows tend to recognize each other instantly, even if they don't agree, even if they clash. The recognition happens beneath preference. The first window opens in early spring, around what we now call March. Aaron named this the seal of recognition. Souls entering here arrive when the system's surface is weakest, when transitions are already underway. These people don't learn to question reality. They arrive questioning it. As children, they sense when adults are pretending. As adults, they spot hollow systems immediately: jobs, institutions, social rituals that function but don't mean anything. People with this seal often feel tired long before they've done much. Not physically, existentially. Seeing through structures takes energy. And they're rarely praised for it. Instead, they're told they're cynical, ungrateful, or negative. But Aaron was clear: recognition isn't negativity. It's perception without anesthesia. The regulators notice these souls early. Confusion is aimed at them fast. They're encouraged to doubt their own clarity, to over-explain, to soften their observations so they don't disturb others. Many learn to go quiet. Others learn sarcasm. Some burn out completely. But the seal doesn't disappear. It waits. The second window opens in high summer, around July. This carries the seal of authority. These souls don't just see what's wrong. They feel compelled to speak it. often without planning, often without safety. There's a heat to them, an intensity people either follow or flee from. They've been told their whole lives to tone it down, be more polite, wait their turn. They rarely do. Aaron described these souls as signal amplifiers. When truth passes through them, it comes out louder, sharper, harder to ignore. That makes them useful and dangerous. Systems tolerate recognition quietly held. They do not tolerate authority expressed openly. People with this seal often experience pushback that seems disproportionate. They lose jobs for saying mild truths. They're excluded for asking basic questions. They're labeled aggressive when they're simply direct. Over time, many internalize the message that their voice causes damage. Aaron insisted the opposite is true. Their voice reveals damage that already exists. The regulators attempt suppression here through punishment, shame, isolation, making examples out of them. But authority doesn't come from permission. It comes from alignment. And once someone with this seal stops asking whether they're allowed to speak, interference weakens dramatically. The third window opens in late autumn, around November. This carries the seal of perception. Aaron called these souls the most difficult to explain and the hardest to deceive. They arrive when external light is withdrawing, when the world appears darker, quieter, more inward. As a result, they learn to see without relying on surface cues. These people don't need evidence presented cleanly. They feel truth before it's articulated. They sense motives before actions. They know when something is wrong without being able to explain why. As children, they're often called sensitive or strange. As adults, they're told they overthink or imagine things. They don't. Their perception operates laterally. While others look forward, they look underneath. This makes them natural dreamers, pattern readers, and silent observers. They can sit in a room and feel the emotional architecture of it without a word being spoken. The downside is overload. Without grounding, this seal can feel like constant exposure. The regulators handle these souls through mislabeling, anxiety, projection, pathologizing intuition until the person no longer trusts it. Aaron warned that this seal is rare because it's hard to maintain. But when stabilized, it's nearly impossible to manipulate. Here's what matters most: these seals are not hierarchical. Recognition doesn't outrank authority. Authority doesn't outrank perception. They're different tools for different functions. And some people carry more than one faintly, but only one primarily. Knowing which one you carry doesn't limit you. It clarifies you. Aaron emphasized that most suffering comes from misapplication. A recognition-sealed soul trying to lead. An authority-sealed soul trying to stay quiet. A perception-sealed soul forcing logic where sensing would suffice. When a seal is lived incorrectly, life feels like constant friction, but when it's lived accurately, something strange happens. Effort drops. Resistance lessens. The world doesn't suddenly become kind, but it becomes legible. You stop trying to be everything and start operating as what you already are, and this is where the teaching becomes truly inconvenient. Because if seals are real, then awakening isn't something you chase. It's something you remember and then align with. No workshop required. No hierarchy needed. Just honesty about how you've always moved through the world. Aaron ended this portion of the teaching with a warning. Knowing your seal without activating it leads to arrogance or despair. One inflates. The other collapses. Neither serves the source fragment. The seal isn't a label. It's a circuit. And circuits are meant to be closed, which brings us to the part the councils erased first. Aaron never described activation as a ritual. No candles. No posture. No repetition. He called it closure, the moment a circuit completes itself after years of running open. According to the quiet way, every primary seal remains partially dormant until it's consciously acknowledged and correctly addressed. Not emotionally. Precisely. He warned his students that once activation begins, the environment reacts immediately. Not symbolically. Mechanically. Because a sealed soul operating unconsciously is manageable. A sealed soul operating deliberately introduces variables the system can't predict. Activation begins with recognition, regardless of which seal you carry. Not admiration. Not hope. Naming. Aaron instructed his students to state their nature plainly, without drama, without apology. Not as a request to be validated, but as a fact being brought into coherence. I know what I am oriented to see, one record quotes. I am not here by drift. The difference matters. Requests generate noise. Statements generate signal. Once recognition is internalized, the second phase engages automatically. Aaron referred to this as realignment. This is where most resistance appears. Thoughts interrupt. Doubt spikes. Old identities resurface with surprising urgency. The mind suddenly produces reasons this is unnecessary, embarrassing, or dangerous. Aaron was explicit: this resistance is not failure. It's feedback. The regulators cannot access the source fragment, but they can flood the interface around it. Mental static. Emotional pull. Urgent distractions. The goal isn't to disprove recognition, it's to exhaust it. If the person disengages, the system stabilizes again. Aaron's solution wasn't confrontation. It was visibility. He taught that the moment interference is identified, it loses leverage. Not fought. Not suppressed. Seen. What is named, one fragment reads, no longer governs. This is where each seal responds differently. Those with the seal of recognition experience a sudden clarity that feels almost cold. Patterns click into place. Relationships, habits, and beliefs rearrange themselves internally without effort. What once felt confusing becomes obvious. The risk here is isolation. Seeing clearly can tempt withdrawal. Aaron cautioned them not to disappear. Recognition is meant to illuminate, not detach. Those with the seal of authority feel pressure in the chest or throat. Not discomfort, compression. As if something is preparing to move. Many feel the urge to speak, write, or confront something they've avoided. This isn't impulsiveness. It's alignment demanding expression. The danger here is explosion. Aaron warned authority-sealed souls to ground before acting. Precision matters more than volume. Those with the seal of perception report a shift in sensory processing. Light sharpens. Sounds carry layers. Dreams intensify. The boundary between internal and external becomes thinner. For them, activation isn't loud, it's deep. The challenge is discernment. Not everything sensed requires action. Aaron emphasized restraint. Perception without stability becomes overwhelm. The final phase is integration. This is where activation becomes irreversible. Aaron instructed his students to remain silent afterward. Not secretive, still. No announcing. No seeking confirmation. The system recalibrates fastest when attention stays inward. Signs appear anyway. Within hours, many report physical sensations without cause: warmth near the chest, a sense of expansion behind the eyes, an unusual calm paired with alertness. Within a day, coincidences cluster. Names repeat. Numbers recur. Conversations land too precisely. Aaron said these aren't messages. They're synchronization artifacts. Evidence that internal alignment is affecting external probability. Then comes the backlash. Interference doesn't escalate violently. It gets subtle. Old insecurities resurface with new language. People close to you test boundaries unconsciously. Opportunities appear that would pull you back into misalignment. Aaron warned that this phase determines durability. The goal isn't to reject the world. It's to stop negotiating with what you already know. He was clear about one thing: activation doesn't make life easier. It makes it honest. Friction decreases because resistance decreases, not because circumstances soften. The seal begins doing what it was designed to do. Recognition clarifies. Authority disrupts. Perception reveals. None of these are comfortable to systems built on repetition. Aaron ended the teaching with a line that appears only once across the fragments: what completes itself cannot return to latency. In other words, once the circuit closes, it stays closed. You can ignore it. You can resist it. But you can't unknow it. He didn't promise enlightenment. He promised orientation. A way to stop misfiring energy into roles that don't fit. A way to understand why certain paths never held. Why certain silences felt unbearable. Why some truths burned the moment they were touched. Activation isn't becoming something new. It's ceasing to dilute what's always been present, and the system notices, not because you announced yourself, but because your signal stabilized. If this story felt familiar rather than surprising, that's not coincidence. Familiarity is the nervous system recognizing accuracy before language catches up. You didn't sit through this to be entertained. You stayed because something in you was already listening. The material you just heard doesn't ask you to believe anything. Belief is optional. Attention is not. Once a pattern is seen clearly, it either integrates or creates friction until it does. That pressure you may feel now, quiet, steady, insistent, isn't urgency. It's alignment requesting continuity. If you're one of the people who's always felt slightly ahead of the room, slightly outside the script, slightly immune to surface explanations, then this channel exists for you. Not to convince you of anything, but to give language to what you've already been carrying without context. If this video sharpened something for you, let it keep sharpening. Subscribe so the next piece reaches you before noise fills the space again. Not everything arrives loudly. Some things arrive precisely. If you found clarity here, press like, not as approval, but as signal reinforcement. It helps this material surface for others who don't yet know what they're searching for but will recognize it when they see it. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, someone who's always questioned, always sensed, always spoken when it cost them, share this with them directly. Not everyone is ready. But the ones who are don't need convincing. They need recognition. Stay oriented. Stay honest. And don't rush what's already in motion.